Oh, you know, I'm gonna turn my phone off too.
As we get started. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. This is our careers with a bachelor's degree, careers in research with a bachelor's degree session. And I have with us today Dr. David Weimer. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Weimer received his PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Akron in Akron, Ohio. His MA in social psychology from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and his BA in psychology and English literature from Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, where he spent 5 semesters on a psychology of humor research team. That's interesting. And I think when you start to see his first slide, you'll see the humor in that. Between college and graduate school, he spent 2 years working as a statistical assistant at Educational Testing Services, or ETS, in Princeton, New Jersey. Dr. Weimer completed his postdoc internship at Pennsylvania Counseling Services Reading Psychiatric Clinic and has been a licensed psychologist in Pennsylvania since 2010. Dr. Weimer also served as a psychologist and first lieutenant in the U.S. Army Medical Service Corps Reserves, where his primary duty was to teach mental health skills and knowledge to enlisted soldiers before deployment. Very interesting. His primary research interest is the psychology of men and masculinities, and he has published many articles and book chapters on the subject. Dr. Weimer also serves as a research manuscript reviewer for several masculinity journals. So wonderful, great, kudos to you. You've got lots there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so you can share your screen there.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
All right, great. Thank you, Stacy. Should I pin my picture?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Okay. All right, let's see, pin. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, all 20 of you. It's nice to see you. As Stacy said, my name is Dr. David Weimer. I'm a professor an associate professor in the psychology department here. I teach personality, abnormal psychology, and also a class called the psychology of adjustment, which is about handling adversity in life, such as divorce, job loss, and things like that. So let me share my screen. I'll go into my presentation now. And Stacy mentioned that she'll be doing the Q&A piece.
Yes.
So Stacy, at any time, just feel free to jump in. So anyway, so here we go. And so what's the instructions with Q&A? Is just tell them to just write any answers in there or any questions in there.
Yes, I apologize. I actually forgot to mention that. So thank you for bringing that up. We do have the Q&A feature. So if you have any questions as we go along, this is a webinar format. So you won't have the capability to be on video or to unmute yourself. But please put your questions for Dr. Weimer in the Q&A, and I will make sure that those questions get addressed. And Dr. Weimer, I will I'll interrupt as best I can with any questions during your presentation as you request.
Great, thank you, Stacy.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I should just mention, I also a few years ago, and every now and then I might next year, I teach a class called the Psychology as a Science and Profession. It's part history of psychology, it's part research methods, and it's also part careers. So a big chunk of this information is from that class. It's called Psych 105, Psychology as a Science and Profession. Also, I'm going to just talk about some of my experiences mentoring students over the years. I've been at Penn State now for 13 years. Before this, I was at Kutztown University and, in graduate school. So I've been working with college students for over 20 years. And an interesting experience that I have is whenever a student has graduated and they contact me a couple of years later about what they're up to. So I'll give some stories about that in a second. But so you see here a bachelor's degree in liberal arts. There's a lot you can do with it. It's a very flexible degree. One thing that research shows that I talk about in my classes is that how well you do in college is in some ways more important than your major. So how well you do, the experiences that you gather, etc. But this is about a research career, right? A research career with a bachelor's degree. And one thing I've learned from personal experience, and also the research findings and data support this, is the idea that it's very important to do well in research methods and statistics classes, right? So doing well in research methods and statistics classes. That's, according to research, the number one thing that psychology graduate schools value. Now, I know this isn't about graduate schools. That's just an indicator of how important it is. But so if you're interested in a research career, those classes are very, very important. And usually they have you write some type of research proposal or something, and that can be very helpful in terms of cultivating your interests, right? Your research interests. Also, the ability to communicate, writing and communication. And so in psychology, the main governing body is called the American Psychological Association, or APA. Several years ago, I went to a presentation at APA called Non-Traditional Careers in Psychology, but you can insert whatever field you're interested in there. And it's interesting to think creatively outside the box. Non-traditional means not the typical, you go to graduate school and you become a professor like me. So doing something that's different from the usual path of just simply just going to graduate school and going into academia. So that's basically what non-traditional means. So one thing I've learned, I've had, like I said, I've had many students over the years, and it's very interesting and rewarding for me to hear from them after they graduate. And many of them have experienced what I write here, serendipity, right? Most of you probably know what that word means, but I define it as having unexpected positive experiences. So many of my former students, they ended up basically just capitalizing on chance. An opportunity came by. For example, a former student of mine, she now lives in, she was originally from Taiwan, and she went back to Taiwan after finishing college at Penn State with a psychology major. And when she was back in Taiwan, she was working in the mental health field, things like that, wanting to go into become a therapist. But she ended up just sitting on a train. There was a guy next to her on a train who gave her his business card, and she ended up working for his company doing corporate trainings or whatever, and she loves it. So just, you never know. She sat next to some guy in a train, networking, right? And he gave her his business card, and it changed her life for the better. And so, so that's what I mean by kind of non-traditional and serendipity. This student down here, Doyun, she was a student who had me for several classes. She's now on my LinkedIn. I'm sure most of you are familiar with LinkedIn, but she also had a very similar experience where an opportunity just came along and she capitalized on chance. So sometimes it's important to be aware when an opportunity, presents itself, right? So it's just an interesting theme I've noticed among former students of how they have these opportunities and they end up doing something they never thought that they would end up doing. And I'm pretty sure, Stacy, you're going to make these available to people afterwards, right? So,
yes, I am.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I'm not going to go over everything, but you could all go back and look at this stuff, and you could read what Doyon wrote. So when I taught psychology as a science and profession, I had many of my former students who I wrote recommendation letters for and things tell me some advice for current Penn State students, and that's what this is from here. Okay, just some resources. You may or may not be aware of these, but I love the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So my degree is in counseling psychology. So I received a great deal of career counseling training, and I've done lots of, career counseling, probably hundreds of times with hundreds of different clients. And the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is a very, very helpful resource. ONET is also a helpful resource. And then the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which stems from the Great Depression. It was back helping people find jobs back then, but it's still obviously a good resource today. It's just an interesting way to find information about various job titles, job careers, because sometimes you might not even know what the name of a job is, right? So, all right, so now I'm going to mention just some of my experience here. All right, so when I graduated from college, it was 1998 when saber-toothed tigers still roamed the land. So I graduated from Ithaca College in 1998, and I didn't want to go to graduate school right away. I took what's called a gap year, which ended up becoming 2 years because I love my job so much. So I found a job. This is really old school, but I found this job in a newspaper ad. But so I applied to many different jobs after I graduated from college. So I'm originally from the suburbs of Philadelphia. I'm from a town called Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, right on the New Jersey border. And Princeton and Lawrenceville, New Jersey, there's a lot of opportunities in that area. I had tons of job interviews around there. And I ended up taking a job as a research assistant at Educational Testing Service. I know that many of you probably don't have positive feelings about ETS. They make the SAT, the GRE, and so on. I've worked on praxis teacher certification exams, but it was a great job as a bachelor's, person. Very good benefits and so on. So if you're interested, here's a link to the careers page. Again, I'm just conveying it from my own experience. So I was able to find a research job with a bachelor's degree. So, and again, very friendly people who worked there. It was a very good experience. Something else, when I first graduated from college, I had many job interviews at market research firms. I actually also, after graduate school, there was a brief time where I was like, well, do I really want to go into academia? And I had a few market research interviews then as well. One job would have involved me conducting focus groups all over the country and so on. But anyway, so the job interviews I had with a bachelor's back in the late 90s involved basically opinion research, giving people surveys and questionnaires, which for me, I'm actually very interested in surveys and questionnaires, what's called psychometrics, creating them. And I actually had a job interview with the Gallup poll. If you've heard of the Gallup poll, I think they're involved in political polling and things like that. So I had a job interview with them. There's a link here to their website. And you see here, our Occupational Outlook Handbook, 19% is very, very high. That's a very good growth rate. So for most of you probably watching this presentation now are probably with 19, 20, 21. If you're young, you want to know that a career is going to last, is going to be around for a while. And market research isn't going anywhere. So, the salary there's pretty good for bachelors. It's actually more than you would make with a master's in counseling, being a master's level psychotherapist, which many of my former students do. But so there you go. If you want to find more information about market research, just click on this here, survey research, click on that there. And of course, any questions at any time. I see some things in the chat, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. So other bachelor's related careers, budget analyst. It's not, academic or research in the academic sense. It's more like working with data and so on. You see the definition of that career there. Again, if you want information about it, you can go here. This one here, I think, looks like a pretty interesting job. Operations research analyst. Very good starting salary. That's actually more than what I make with a PhD. I make, just full disclosure, as a PhD as a professor, I make around $80,000 a year if you include everything that I do. I have a small private practice on the side, things like that. But let me look to these chats first, see what's here. So
Yep, it's just letting people know
okay,
that, yeah, networking is important, and that your presentation will be shared out so that they can be able to click on these links.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I'm used to teaching in Zoom and going to chat. So Q&A here. Okay, here's a question. How would you recommend getting recommendations from professors if you're getting an asynchronous online degree? That's a very good question. About a year ago, myself and a couple other psych professors, we gave a presentation like this. It was about mental health careers, and the most questions were actually about recommendation letters. But so I teach several World Campus classes that are asynchronous, and I have my students who do well in the class. They just email me, so I get to know the students even though I don't actually see them face to face. Now, I might sometimes in a Zoom meeting if we talk about research or something, but the classes that I teach are very essay oriented, so I get to know their writing very well. So in a way, I actually get to know my World Campus students better than my University Park students. So I would say, just if there's a teacher who you liked, whose class you liked, feel free to email that person. So I have my World Campus students email. And when I think about it, I probably write just as many recommendation letters for World Campus students as I do for University Park. So I would say if you had a professor who you feel some kind of connection with, you like their research or their interests or whatever, feel free to just email them. It can't hurt, So that's what I say. Did that answer your question? Okay. All right, good. Okay, thank you. All right, so anyway, let me share screen here, and I will show just the Occupational Outlook Handbook page for operations research analysts. As you see here, what they do, 23%, that's one of the highest I've ever seen. As far as I know, the fastest growing career right now, well, the most in-demand career is actually hospice nurse. But on the one of the most fastest growing careers I know of is genetics counselor, which it's somewhat related to, but that's like 26-27% growth, but 23% is very, very high. So this is a very vibrant field. What they do, identify problems, collect and organize data, gather input, analyze data. So it's like very similar to doing academic work, but it's in the private sector. And the private sector, usually people make more money. The problem is you don't get the summer off like you do as a teacher. But I just think when I taught Psych 105, this is something I mentioned quite a bit about operations research analysts. So let me now go back to the presentation. Okay. Data cleansing. So when I graduated from college, I spent a few months going to job interviews. I went to a few job interviews for data cleansing firms. So I don't know if anybody's even heard of that, but what it is it's a company that gets a data set that has problems with it, either problems with it. It's usually like missing data or something like that. So you have to go in and you have to fix the data set. That's what data cleansing is, to make it more accurate so that the data can be analyzed effectively. So I had a couple of job interviews. I remember that it didn't pay all that great, but of course this was many years ago, so it might be different now. Just something from my experience, just FYI. Okay, now I've had once again, I learn a lot. One thing I love about being a professor is I learn just as much from my students as they learn from me, right? So many of my former students have gone into nonprofit careers. And as you see here, the nonprofit sector has grown more than government and private businesses. So the nonprofit sector has a lot of growth. And people hear the word nonprofit and they think, oh, you can't make a lot of money in there. But there's actually, ironically, a lot of money in nonprofit, right? Nonprofit simply means that they don't have stocks, they don't have shareholders, they simply just take the profits and funnel it back into the organization. Technically, ETS, where I worked, was technically a nonprofit, which but anyway, so fundraising, many Penn State students have experiences with fundraising because of Thon, right? So, or various student organizations, right? So you see here, now there's lots of within group variance. There's lots of diversity among nonprofit organizations, but according to the OOH, median's around 74,000 a year starting, pretty good for bachelors. Not as fast growing as operations research analyst, but still pretty fast growing, or not as fast as market research. But again, it's another option for people, right? And many of the former students I have who work in nonprofit are very happy, very successful, right? There's just some, of course, this list here is not exhaustive. You could come up with, there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of nonprofits. These are just some examples. Okay, how important is the specific psych option like clinical when applying? Okay, Sarah, I assume you're a psych major. When applying to these types of jobs, are they looking for people with a specific type of psych option? Okay, would like to answer this question live. Sir, sure.
Yep, you can go ahead, Dr. Weimer. I just was the one to click it, answer.
Oh, okay.
Since you were starting to answer.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not used to the webinars, but anyway, okay. So in psychology, those of you who aren't psych majors, there's several options. The thing that I'm actually on what's called the undergraduate committee, where we determine the courses that are students can take for the various options. I would say the option that you have can kind of set up the coursework that you take. So when you apply to a specific job, they probably look at your transcript to see what courses you took and how well you did in those courses. So let's say you apply to a nonprofit that's neuropsych related and you have a neuropsych option. So one thing is with the option is you can structure your career the way you want in terms of the subject matter you find interesting, right? So I'd say it really depends on the employer, what they're looking for, but it's all about fit, it's all about match, right? So again, using that, if you're neuropsych, one thing, the business option, right? Like that market research, if you want to go into market research, psychology has a business option. That would be a very good combination. So I'd say it's all about what you want to do and find an organization that's related to that. So hopefully, Sarah, that answers your question. If not, I can clarify further. Okay, so let's move on from, I don't want to take up too much time. Um, Government jobs. All right, so I had a student actually who was an undergraduate teaching assistant for me several years ago, and she's now working for the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, which I believe is in Arlington, Virginia, and she likes it there. Her biggest issue actually is the fact that it's anything near Washington, DC is very expensive cost of living. So she can't afford an apartment on her own. She has to have roommates. So that's an issue, but that was an issue for me too when I was younger. But so cost of living aside though, NIMH, National Institute on Aging. I have a former student who works for the Centers for Disease Control, which I believe is down south, North Carolina, Georgia. I think it might be in Georgia, somewhere like that. But so there's many government agencies out there. There's obviously this list is not exhaustive. These are just, I put these on the slide because I have former students who work for these places. And I also use research from these places for my slides and the classes that I teach. So government agencies are a good option. I know a lot of people who are pretty happy doing these places. So if you go here, you can click. Most of these agencies have something on their website where they list job openings, and many of them take people right out of college, internships or something like that. Now, speaking of the government, something related to government is social policy research. All right, social policy research, which is basically doing research on the effectiveness of legislation. All right. One example I talk about in my classes is, if any of you are familiar with the DARE program, DARE, the DARE Drug Prevention Program, lots of research on that program, unfortunately, shows that it's not very effective. It's not a very effective program, but it's important to know, right? So that's an example of social policy research, looking at government legislation and the effectiveness of it or lack of effectiveness of it, et cetera. A friend of mine who I went to graduate school with, unfortunately, had to drop out of graduate school fairly early on so he just had a bachelor's degree. But anyway, he ended up getting a job doing policy research with a bachelor's degree somewhere in Cincinnati, Ohio is where he ended up working. And he really likes it. So he got a job working, I can't remember the name of the firm, but he got a job working for a social policy research firm. Very happy, makes a good living and so on. So it is another option for people with a bachelor's degree who want to go into a research field. So a nice combo, if you want to go into social policy, maybe like majoring in psychology or sociology, minoring in political science or vice versa. So the various major minor combos could fit into certain areas here. Just some examples. So RAND is something I teach about in my career class. It's a think tank. A good friend of mine from college works in a think tank, just with somebody, and they work together to design projects. And then she really enjoys it, gets to use her creativity. That's one thing I think, getting to utilize creativity, I think, is a really underrated and really satisfying element of a career. So you see here, Families and Work Institute. The Pew Research Center is a place in some of the publications I've done, I use and cite some of their research. So the Pew Research Center is a good place to work. And let me actually show their website here. Let me go to the Pew Research Center's website. Here we go, right here. So if you go to the Pew Research Center's website, they have, let me just go back here. You click on About, and then Careers down here, Careers. So most websites for most companies in general have a careers page. All right. So working at Pew Research Center, view current job openings. And I looked at this the other day, and there's quite a lot of interesting stuff on here. Writer, research director, associate director, undergraduate intern, undergraduate research intern. So there you go, right there, after graduating from college. And it's probably a paid internship, which is, of course, a benefit. So there you go. So that's just some information about social policy research, just some examples. So there you go. So other resources. Oh, one thing here, Stacy and I were talking about this right before, and I came up with this. Many of my former students have gone on to do what's called a a post-baccalaureate or post-bac internship. I have a former student who I wrote a recommendation letter for. She's now at Notre Dame University in Indiana doing a post-bac internship. So let me go here. So I don't know if you can see your new share. Let me go in here. Okay, so Harvard University has this list of post-baccalaureate job listings. Many of my former students have found positions through here. So you see here, research technician. Although it's not, it's posted by Harvard, but it's places all over the country. Sometimes even places like Guam. All right. As an aside, Guam is always looking for psychologists. It's a U.S. territory in the Pacific Ocean, near actually the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. But so just, you never know where you're going to see a job opening, right? So there you go. Post-baccalaureate. Whoops, I'm sorry. I went out of the full screen. Let me go back into the presentation here. Okay, there we go. All right. Now, so just some closing takeaway messages. The importance of networking. You've probably heard that before. I gave some stories about that. Proactive when cultivating your career. By proactive, I mean just don't just wait, sit back and wait. Go to things, search websites, come up with lists, send emails, all sorts of things like that. Send your resume, send your CV, all sorts of things you can do. Customizing your career, like the student a couple minutes ago asked about the different options, So one thing I ask my students in psychology is, are you interested, what population are you interested in working with? Children? Do you want to work with children? Do you want to work with adults? I had a student who is interested in working in the prison system, drug and alcohol also. So what population? Just self-knowledge, all right, realistic standards. One pitfall I've had with many of my students is just having kind of unrealistic goals. Like I had a student who only applied to like Yale and Harvard and Brown, and that was it. And it's okay. Maybe you should have some safety things in there. So it's important to have high, confident, but realistic standards and expectations. And then one thing I tell my students quite frequently is it's important to see things as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. It's like how you construe your reality makes a big difference, right? Okay, and that is it. Yeah, sure. So yeah, use the Q&A thing. This actually took a little faster than I expected to get through. But so here I found this silly picture here on social media. But anyway, so does anybody have any questions for me or about this subject matter? Again, I apologize if I talk too fast, or if I went through too fast.
No, a lot of great information. And with all these links and everything, I think it'll be super helpful for all the participants today when they get this slide deck, so that we can be able to, you can click on the links and take more time to look into some of these opportunities.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Feel free to use
one thing I really wished I had more in college is the how. How you do this, and that's why I want to show actual concrete links and stuff where you can find these things.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest, questions that our office does get as well is, like, where do you find these opportunities, and how do you get them? And I love the one question about even, those references, for somebody who's maybe in World Campus. Like, thank you for addressing that, because, it's not just about taking the class, but it's being a part of it and really learning and networking with the faculty members to understand the educational component, but also to understand, where that faculty is currently, where they're going, where they've been.
Definitely. And when I think about teaching really large lecture hall classes and a student from a large league, I've taught classes with as many as 350 students, and a student from one of those classes, if a student from one of those classes stands out in my mind in a positive way 2 years later, that really says a lot, and I mentioned that in a recommendation letter. So, participating in class, which, believe it or not, I'm actually a very introverted person. When I was in college, I was nervous participating in class, but so I empathize with that. But participating in class, that means a lot to me. Coming to my office hours or meeting over Zoom, emailing me, all sorts of things, asking me about being involved in research. Those things all get filed away in my mind when I write recommendation letters.
Absolutely.
Here's-
We have
here's a question.
another Q&A. So do you have any tips for networking in terms of where to find people to network and how to go about it?
Here's one thing: professional organizations, right? So I used to be a professor at Kutztown University. So when I first finished graduate school, I moved there to the Kutztown, Reading, Allentown, Bethlehem area, and I was a member of what's called the Lehigh Valley Counseling Association. So I met lots of people. I could have joined a couple of group practices that way. So that was a great. So professional organizations, APA. I love when I go to the APA conference. I love what's called the social hours. So I'm a member of what's called Division 51 of APA, Men and Masculinity. And I go to the Division 51 social hour, and I have a few publications stemming from, people I met, and we agreed to do research, studies together, because research is really a communal thing. For me, I'm really good with writing and coming up with ideas. I'm not good with the number crunching side of things. So I have strengths and weaknesses. My friend Christine from graduate school, she's the opposite. She's really good with the number crunching. So she and I have published a few things together. So, but, just anyway, so just professional organizations, American Psychological Association, things like the event that you're talking about in a couple weeks, things like career fairs, right? But in my experience, the way I found my postdoctoral internship was through what's called the Early Career Psychologist Listserv. So listservs have been helpful for me, right? So if you have an idea for a research project, how would you find a mentor and funding to execute the project? Boy, that's a very good question. So, well, it depends on, I guess, kind of the context that you're in. So for me, I work for a university, right? I have an office here on campus. I actually don't have a lab because I'm a teaching faculty, not a research faculty, but I do my research on SurveyMonkey anyway online. So there's various ways you can get funding. There's grants. I mean, that's a big thing, but there's ways to get grants. There's scholarships, awards. So for me, I'm on the undergraduate committee here, and we give out awards every year to undergrads. That's a way to do it. Here in the psych department, there's the Honors Club, Psy-Chi, and the Psychology Honors Club has a research conference every year with poster presentations. So anyway, so just, find somebody who's like somebody like a professor like myself or someone else whose interests are similar to yours. That's one of the keys of the academic world or the research world, not just academic, but the research world, is to kind of figure out what are my interests, what am I interested in, and how can I find other people whose interests match mine. So that's a big thing. So that's, I'd say the mentorship piece is find somebody either through the other networking question, through other things. And then with the funding, there's various sources, scholarships, grants, et cetera. So, yeah. Okay, anything else?
Yes, any other? Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So how would you tailor your research experiences on your resume to lead into a leadership or entrepreneurial role?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah. Maybe so. In psychology, there's an area called industrial organizational psychology, and leadership is a big part of that. So maybe doing research on leadership, being in charge of student organizations, just demonstrating that you're capable of leadership. Because when you apply for jobs, they want to look at your resume or your CV and see that you've done very similar things to what they want you to do for them. So anytime you can take a leadership role, entrepreneurial. I actually have a student who was in my class last semester who is on a student organization about entrepreneurship. So she, it's almost like a Shark Tank kind of thing, right? So I guess it's just finding opportunities that match your interests. Once again, I like to see my career and other people's careers as kind of like a flow chart, like here's my interest. Here's this opportunity that's related to my interest, and so on like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of to go along with the whole entrepreneurial piece as well. If you're not familiar with the Happy Valley Launch Box in downtown State College, Launch Box, yep. They also have some great resources there as well. And it is downtown on Burroughs. So if you're interested, I'll find the link here and put it in the chat here.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Okay, it's 11:52. Anything else? I still have about, oh, you're welcome. Okay. I still have about 10 minutes till my psych of adjustment class. So anything else? No? Bueller? No, okay.
All right, I'm going to put that Launchbox link in the chat here. But again, for anybody who's, for those of you who are still online with us, by all means, feel free to reach out. I'm going to be sending all to everyone who was in attendance today. I will send the slide deck. Thank you, Dr. Weimer, for agreeing to do that. And this will be up on our YouTube channel as well. So the College of the Liberal Arts has a YouTube channel, so I would highly recommend subscribing to that so that you know when those things come up. So this will probably come up early next week, the recording. So if you wanted to go back to that as well. So I am just going to put in another plug real quick for the virtual recruiting week, February 6th through the 10th. And that is, I'll actually share my screen here.
The channel for the recruitment week.
All right. So that's the virtual recruitment week that you can go ahead and click on the QR code for further information. What is the channel? Yes, on YouTube. I will get that as well. I should have that right in my, it's in my, find it here. It's on our webpage, so might as well just go in and get it real quick here for you. I will throw that in the chat as well. So this is our individual playlist for the Career Enrichment Network that's on the college's YouTube page, but yes, that will take you there to our playlist, and we've got some things that are already uploaded. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Weimer. We really appreciate you taking your time. And I see another thing in the Q&A is the recruitment week only for those actively seeking a job or internship, or can you go to check things out? You can absolutely just come to check things out. The purpose is, for jobs and internships. And maybe there's something that you're like, oh, I just want to kind of know a little bit more about it. It is a great networking opportunity as well. And when you meet with that recruiter, you can simply just let them know, like, I'm just kind of looking at things. Maybe I'm a first year student. Maybe I'm not quite ready, or maybe what kind of things, might be up my alley. So definitely feel free to check things out as well. Thank you for that question. So, all right. Perfect. Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Weimer. Really appreciate it. We'll get you to your next class. If anybody has any further questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. We can always put you in touch with Dr. Weimer. All right. Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Care.
Take care. Nice meeting you.